So I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I was in art class, and one of my friends, I still remember her name, we were coloring, and she said, "Why is your skin brown?" And she said, "You drink too much chocolate milk. That's why your skin's brown." That was my first time where I felt like, wow, okay, my skin's brown. And it was said so loud. Everyone in the classroom, it got quiet. Everybody looked over at me. And I'll never forget that moment.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is No Judgement Here with Tish Ross, the podcast. I'm glad that you are here. Tonight's topic is going to be a difficult one. However, it is one that really needs to be, I think, spoken about more often. And just so you know, I had asked anybody that wanted to come on and discuss this particular subject. And I had 2 people that said yes. And so we are not professionals. We are here just to share our personal experience and opinions on the subject of racism. I'm going to bring in my guests. I have Elena Rodriguez and Allegra Havana. They are both coming in to share their personal experiences regarding racism. And one of the things that we're going to do tonight is we're going to share personal stories, explore maybe sort of in a roundtable why we think that racism continues to exist and why it continues to thrive, and also ask ourselves maybe how we can be a part of the solution and help others. So without further ado, grab your coffee, grab your drink, open your mind and your heart, and get ready to hear some very personal stories on this particular subject matter. I'm going to welcome in my guest, Elena Rodriguez.
Hello.
Allegra Havana. Thank you both for being here. I'm so glad that you guys have joined me. I have to tell you how this subject matter kind of started. And I know a young lady. She's young. She is a Caucasian young lady. Her fiance is African American. They are a beautiful couple who are expecting their first child, baby boy. They were sitting out on the bumper or on the tailgate of their vehicle, watching 4th of July fireworks, just enjoying their evening. And during the end, or sort of nearing the end of their evening, there was a truck that drove by, a truck of Hispanic young men. I think there were some older gentlemen in there as well, but for sure there were some young Hispanic men in the truck. Drove by, flipped him the bird, and called her fiance the N-word. And when I was having this discussion, we were chatting, it struck me, it really actually, I hate racism, it sucks, and it breaks my heart. I don't understand it at all, but it does exist. But I think what broke my heart more is when we were chatting, and here she is in the most vulnerable, wonderful chapter in her life, in their lives. And she was talking to me and she was like, wow, my baby is going to be half and half. And she's already trying to figure out how to prepare him for the cruelty in this world, the cruelty that exists behind racism. Obviously, there's other things that we have to prepare our children for, prepare ourselves for, but racism, unfortunately, is one of them. And so I'm glad that both of you guys said yes, and I brought both of you in. I want you to introduce yourselves a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then tell me a little bit of why you feel racism still exists, and share a little bit about and I'm sure we could go all day in terms of how we've experienced it personally, but share maybe a moment that you remember, something that impacted you, and did it change your life in any way, or the way that you view the world, or, and I know that's a lot of questions. So I'm going to start with you, Elena. Tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and then share with us a moment that you experienced racism, and what are your thoughts behind why it still exists?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm Elena Rodriguez. I live in Indiana, Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I'm a Mexican American here in the Midwest. Just that alone makes me a little bit of a minority because everywhere I go, I am surrounded by white people, Caucasians. But I was born here and I don't speak Spanish. It's all I know, but yet I've experienced racism. So I'm an entrepreneur and I just believe in building your dream. But my first experience that I can remember was in first grade. And my parents grew up here in Indiana, a small town in Indiana, and they were entrepreneurs. And so they became very successful opening one of the first Mexican restaurants back in 1971, I think it was. So very early on, one of the first, and there's a story behind that. It was leased by a white guy and he thought he would get his money back. He didn't think that my parents were going to make it successful. So he kind of thought, let me do this. They're going to fail. I'm going to get more money from them. And it became a huge success. But with that experience, my parents, when I was probably around 2 or 3 years old, they moved us out into an area where we could have good education. There wasn't a lot of crime. We weren't in the city, but we were the only minorities. Okay. So my first experience that I didn't really even know at the time, I was in art class. Like, this will tell you how much it imprinted me at the time. So I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I was in art class, and one of my friends, I still remember her name. I graduated with her, but I remember her. We were coloring something, and I remember her looking at my arm, and she said, "Why is your skin brown?" And she said, "You drink too much chocolate milk. That's why your skin's brown." And at the time, I'm just thinking, like, what? And I don't think fast on my feet, especially, I still don't. And I just remember saying, well, then you must drink too much white milk because your skin's white. I mean, I didn't know what to say, but that was my first time where I felt like, wow, okay, my skin's brown. And it was said so loud. Everyone in the classroom, it got quiet. Everybody looked over at me, and I'll never forget that moment. I will never forget that moment. And I was, 5, 6 years old?
And so let me ask you this. First of all, I can relate to going to or being born or moved into a city where it was primarily Caucasian, and being one of the first Hispanic families in our school. And I think there was maybe 2 or 3 total, and then there's another, but enough to be able to count on one hand. And the fact that my dad asked us or asked our mom to not speak Spanish to us, this is it kills me, because he didn't want us to have an accent because he felt like we wouldn't get the same treatment, or maybe the treatment would be worse if we spoke Spanish and if we spoke with a heavy accent. And so, unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish either. Sadly, embarrassing. I'm just embarrassed to not. And the other is, I'm proud of my culture, and I'm proud of who I am. And it saddens me to think that my dad felt that he was protecting us, I feel like, and trying to give us an opportunity to maybe not be as mistreated, I guess. And so, Elena, let me ask you this. Why do you feel like racism continues to thrive? What is your thought?
I believe I actually have the definition because I wanted to actually like, what is the true definition and how do we actually perceive it?
Mhm.
Right. So the definition is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. And so to me, this can mean many things. Racism can affect many areas, but I feel the bottom line is pure ignorance.
Mm.
Pure ignorance. It can be fear of the unknown, but you know, I just think it shows more about the person that is prejudiced because they're so narrow minded. They haven't
Mm.
even learned. It's kind of like taking an answer from someone and receiving it as truth when you haven't even searched for the answer yourself. So
Mm.
I believe it still exists because people are just ignorant. And on another level, maybe they haven't been exposed. Maybe, when I think of when I graduated, I was still one of the only minorities in my class. So I wasn't really exposed to a lot of different ethnicities and races growing up. Now, racism even fell in my own culture because
Mm.
when I would go to like grandma's on the weekends and go to the baile and go to dance and hang out, like they were almost prejudiced against me because they called me too white. I was too white.
Mm.
So I just think it's ignorance, bottom line, and people are too lazy to just really put themselves in environments that they can truly learn and expose themselves to different cultures. They're just assuming based on where they're standing without ever having been surrounded by anything different. That's just my opinion.
No, I agree. I believe that there are so many in this world that follow the crowd. They don't even know why. They just do it because it's very elementary, very juvenile, maybe not even well, maybe elementary, but I believe that they just kind of follow the crowd.
Yeah.
Like you said, they don't even get to know these people, but it has snowballed into, you know, obviously hatred and yes, ignorance. But on the flip side, I think, and I want to get to Allegra, but I think also that while we say that, I think of the young lady that shared her story with me. I think even though we know that, how's that going to help her as a mama, the wife of her precious fiance? Like knowing that people are ignorant, but it still hurts. And it
Mm-hmm.
hurt you, and it hurts me, and I'm sure Allegra's going to share her story, and it hurts her, and sometimes it makes me think, what can I do? That's why I wanted to come on and have a
Mm-hmm.
podcast. Maybe this will be shared out so that, again, people that have experienced racism can relate, and then maybe people that haven't experienced racism will learn something. That's the
Yes.
reason
And
why I wanted to go live.
as I'm thinking of like the many different times that something popped up, throughout my years, it has been so silly. Like from where it's come from, it's made that
Mm.
other person, gosh, just look, really so ignorant, so closed-minded. But I come from within my family, we've got a lot of mixed races. We got a lot of, mixed uh cousins and things. And so it's really just taking the time to get to know other people. There's nothing to
Absolutely.
fear. There's nothing. It's like I don't know how deep rooted it goes, and I'm sure every circumstance is its own. But one of my cousins married a Caucasian, and he tans very dark, right? So when he plays outdoors sports, and in the summertime, he just gets really dark. His skin gets really dark, and his two children are really pale skin, red curly hair, blue eyes, and he had them at the park. His own daughters had them at the park, and one of them was acting out, and so he was disciplining her on the bench, and someone at the park called the authorities and thought that he was like kidnapping them or stealing them or something, and he's like, these are my children. So we it's touched home very, very close. And so I don't know. I think conversation is a place to start. What you're doing here tonight is amazing and awesome, because I think it does need to be discussed.
It just makes me sick. Like that whole story sickens me. And that is ignorance. That is a huge sign of ignorance. Okay, I'm going to move to Allegra, but I'm going to read a comment super quick. Christy Bett says, we have a neighbor who doesn't like our Black neighbors, and they started harassing me because we're friends. I had to get the sheriff involved. You hit the nail on the head, Elena, when you said ignorance. Melinda Dobson says, times have changed so much. My grandfather owned a restaurant in the 50s, while not a prejudiced man, but had to be because of the times. No Blacks eat in restaurants, no water fountains. Yes, there were specific water fountains that were for the African American and specific for whites, which I don't get it. Allegra, I'm going to bring you in or unmute your mic. I was getting a little bit of feedback, and so that's why I unmuted it. So introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with racism.
Certainly. Hello, everyone. My name is Allegra Havana Pacheco, and I am from New Mexico, and I have always lived in New Mexico. I am Indigenous, Spanish, and Mexican, and I am bilingual. And my story is one that I grew up in a small town, and we were all minorities. So in other words, where I grew up, it was a lot of Hispanic people. However, because I grew up in a family that had a business, I was exposed to other things at a young age. And first of all, I just really want to thank you so much, Tish, for bringing up this topic, because I know that it's a very sensitive one, but I feel like it's something that really has to be talked about, because the more that we deny it, the more that we sweep it underneath the rug, the more that it's not going to go anywhere. And it exists. And
Yes.
Unfortunately, when I was thinking about instances, I have about 10 plus instances that I have experienced with racism. And the first one was through my father. So as I mentioned, my father has always been a businessman, but and he's also a veteran. Growing up, I saw how he was treated differently because of his skin color as a businessman. I heard stories, just like the woman that commented on your show recently, about how when he would go to restaurants as a truck driver, he would be denied service at certain locations because of his skin color. So that was the perspective that I had. Even though I grew up in a not really diverse environment, we were all Hispanic in the area. Because I was exposed to other things, I was able to see different parts of the world. And when I first went to college, I was 18 years old, the first time that I experienced racism. And I was at the swimming pool in my college that is in New Mexico. And I was inside the pool, really excited, never had a pool. From a small town, we don't have pools. So I'm in the pool, and all of a sudden I hear a group of Caucasian people that were sitting, hanging out in the lane next to me, saying, "These dirty spics are everywhere." And so, of course, I looked around like, what are they talking about? It was only me in the pool. So that being said, I was appalled. I was shocked. I never experienced that myself personally. And I really think that racism is so ugly because it's literally based on stereotypes, it's based on judgments, it's based on what somebody looks like. And I'm sorry, but we all bleed red when it comes down to it. And for me, my most recent incident was about a couple of years ago. Being originally from New Mexico, many times we have people that will move into this area of different cultures and come here and try to disrespect the culture, I guess you could say. They have a stereotype about the culture. They have no idea, you know, how long we've been here, if we've been here, or even a concern to get to know the culture. So part of what my mission is to really embrace the Hispanic Latino culture and to showcase my culture and to showcase all of the beautiful things in it. We have a beautiful culture, we have beautiful food, we have beautiful people. Um, and I feel like when we share that with the world, it gives people an opportunity to get to know us on something more than just skin color. But going back to my recent example, this was during COVID. I was in a traffic situation and I was in a vehicle. And during that time, of course, you didn't want to get around anyone. We were all wearing masks, right? So I was trying to go, and the gentleman in front of me got really mad. He was an older gentleman, a white older male, and he got off of his vehicle, came to my vehicle, and started calling me, pardon the French, a fucking wetback. And what was I doing? He started to threaten me with his arms like that, like trying to get to me. I was inside the vehicle, and I was just really appalled. Like, wow, I could not believe the rage that I saw in this man's eyes. So I rolled up my window, let him do his thing. I called the police later. I had several witnesses that witnessed his behavior towards me and how he was trying to basically assault me and calling me names. The guy was not from New Mexico. He was visiting, but that's just the most recent example of things that are so ugly. You know, we don't even know anyone's background. We don't know their story. We don't know if they had a bad day. And to start slinging racial slurs, I feel is just so, so sad. And where we've gone today with it, it really needs to be addressed and it really needs to be stopped because, as you mentioned, and Elena also mentioned it as well, I have experienced racism myself from my own people. I have been in an interracial relationship before, and I got hell from that from my own people. I got hell from that from everyone. And to me, I just think it is so petty and so ignorant, as Elena mentioned before, to judge somebody on something so basic like skin color and something so basic like race. And you see, in my opinion, today it's becoming more and more comfortable to treat people like shit because of their skin color. And I'm not standing for that. And I'm not okay with that. And I encourage everyone out there that if you have experienced it, you have the right to speak up. You have the right to express yourself. And most importantly, you have the right to defend yourself. God made us all equal. We are all his children. I love everyone that is God's child. It does not matter to me what color you are. And as far as what we can do about it, for me, I really think that we need to build up our tolerance for other people and stop the stereotype. Stop saying, oh, all Mexicans like beans or all so and so. You know, that is so elementary and it's so petty. And really, when we prevent ourselves from getting to know somebody based on something as minute as their skin color, we are really missing out on life. I have friends of all colors and all cultures, and I love them all the same. And I feel like we need to really just embrace each other as God's children, as God intended it, because that is what we are. We are all equal and we are all God's children, and that is my perspective.
I love that. And that is so true. I wish that, and I'm glad that you guys are here and you're sharing your perspectives. I'm getting ready to ask sort of or maybe make a statement that it's a little bit, might be controversial, but I'm going to say it here in just a second. But I went to a Black Lives Matters rally, and one of the things that the MC was asking the crowd to do, he stopped and he said, it was a Caucasian MC, and he said, everybody that's here at this Black Lives Matters rally, I want you, if you are not African American, I want you to go up to an African American and ask them what is something that you can do and what do they worry about the most in these days and times. And I went up to a mother and her son, and her son was in high school, and she said, what you can do is to continue to defend those that won't speak up for themselves. If you see somebody hurting someone or saying something nasty because of someone's race or skin color, step in and defend them, protect them. Then she said the thing that she was most worried about was her son getting in his car, driving to and from school because of the, not all police are pulling people over because of their race. Not every police officers or policemen, policewomen. Her concern is that because her son is African American, that he's going to get pulled over and drug out of the car and beaten and possibly killed. We've seen it. Police officers' whole body, knees, foot on someone's throat, and they couldn't breathe and they passed away. And so she was concerned about that. And as she was telling me this, I was sobbing. I was like, because she said that every morning before he would go to school, every morning before he would drive to school, she would make him sit in the car, start the car, and press on the brakes to make sure that both brake lights were working. She wanted him to test the blinkers, left and right blinkers, to make sure the blinkers were working. She went to the front and wanted him to turn his headlights on to make sure both headlights were working so that it wouldn't give the police any reason to pull her son over. And I thought, how sad is that you have to do that prior to your child driving to school. And I think and I'm going to say something, and gosh, I hope that, well, I'm just going to say, it's my thought. I don't know anything, and this is not, well, it could be political. I don't know. People can make it political, but I don't know anything about what's going on with this ICE group. Okay. All I see is what I see, honest to God, is what I see on TikTok. And I don't know if this statement's going to be good or bad, because I don't know, because I am Hispanic, because I'm not African American. But one of my thoughts while all this is happening, there was this, what do you call it, rally down the street from where I work. And we were getting alerts and warnings that, it could turn into something unpleasant, and that the police or that ICE might come down. And for the first time in my life, I was where I work, and I have two Hispanic girls that work with me. I was afraid to be Mexican. And I thought, because according to TikTok, again, I don't know if this stuff is real or not, because you never know. Maybe it is. But that these members of this group were coming and grabbing men and women who were actually citizens of the U.S. And I know TikTok is not always right. I know. What I'm saying is if any of that is true, which the news exaggerates and all the things, but for the first time, I was afraid. I was afraid to be Hispanic because I thought someone was going to come and yank me because of my race.
Thank you for watching Prospera TV Network. We hope you're enjoying the show. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
What are y'all's thoughts on that? I'm sure I'm misinformed. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
Well, I can speak to having two sons who are full Mexican. Their father's Mexican. I'm Mexican, so therefore they are Mexican, and they're 20 and 24 this year. But when my oldest was learning to drive, it's a real thing. You actually go through a different kind of training on if you get pulled over. And these are things that you should probably teach your child regardless.
Yes.
Normally we're teaching them how to drive, but we don't really break down if you get pulled over, right? But my husband at the time, their father, so we're talking, 30, 40 years ago, he was hanging out with some of his cousins and some of his friends. And he went to an inner city school that was predominantly Mexican and Black. And so that's who he grew up with. And they're hanging out, couple friends, Mexicans, Blacks, just hanging out, not doing anything. Their car was parked. They were hanging around the outside, just in a parking lot, just talking, no drugs, no drinking, just hanging out. And a cop came up, and before you know it, they're all handcuffed. The car's being stripped down, but they weren't even driving. They were just hanging out. And so I feel like at that time that traumatized, who is now my ex-husband, because he talked about it a lot. And so for him, it was very important that his sons, my sons, knew that it doesn't matter what you're doing. If they want to pull you over simply for any reason, they can. And if that happens, here's what you do, And so to have that extra conversation is sad. It is sad because if you're teaching them how to drive appropriately and not break the law while driving, that should be the end of it. But unfortunately, when your skin is a different color, that's not the end of it. And my husband experienced, or, my ex-husband experienced that. So that was very real, and something that, as odd as it might seem today, people might think I'm silly when I worry about my son driving today, but that's in the back of my mind all the time. That it's always in the back of my mind. And I think just from the different experiences that I've gone through over like silly stuff. One of mine that I've got to share is I was throwing one of my cousins a baby shower, and she was marrying a white guy, and the mother-in-law was prejudiced. So was having a hard time that this was the woman that he chose. So anyway, it was pretty much known she did not want him marrying into our family. But I'm hosting this baby shower now, and I'll just never forget that. I mean, and this, it's silly, but it's a for real thing. And so we've got crock pots that, we're all at my grandma's house, but we're making crock pots. And so she's going through the crock pots and asking me, so what do we call these dishes? And I said, that would be meatballs and hot wings. Because it was freaking meatballs and hot wings. And in just that, again, ignorance, like it's meatballs just like your meatballs, and it's hot wings out of a frozen bag. But like, what do we like? She didn't even want to like touch it. Like, what do we call these dishes? And I literally was like, meatballs and hot wings. And so it doesn't matter what extreme it is, it's still ugly, it's still ugly. So that's just
I mean, I laugh because it is super silly. It is, at the end of the day, it is super silly. I think where it gets to be tragic is when obviously it's gone to the extreme that we know in history, right? In history, it's slavery, and it's gone to the extreme, which is, it's sad, but it too is ridiculous. I just don't, I mean, I don't understand it. I don't think any of us do. How about you, Allegra? What do you think? And I know that I sort of brought up the ice, and again, like I said, I don't know anything about anything. I don't watch TV. I scrolled through TikTok and watched some of the horror that I was like, holy smokes, man, I hope my driver's license is current, because what happens if I'm nabbed? What's going to happen? What are your thoughts on that? Just thoughts.
So, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that a lot of people don't know about ICE because they may be in areas where ICE is not at. So, I'm in an area where ICE is here, and it's real. And to touch on the topic about being afraid to be Hispanic, yes, certainly. I have had conversations. I just met with some family in Las Vegas, and I had conversations with family members over there that said the same thing. They encouraged me to get my passport. They told me that they're concerned about that, about being nabbed by ICE. And for some people, it's a real concern. And I know that if you live in an area where maybe you don't have that in your neighborhood, maybe just be open to the fact that it does exist, and it is real, and it is happening. And I have seen several federal vehicles in my town over the last month. And I think that because going a little bit further into detention or corrections, racial profiling, I believe racial profiling exists as well. I am a person who has had experience with detention, and that's all I'm going to say. However, I'm going to say that it is something that is not a humane thing, and many of the minorities are the ones who are in the correction system, and that's something that also has to be addressed as well. So if all these people are committing crimes out there, why is the population of most of the correction systems minorities? And that's just a question that I would like to put out there for everyone to ponder and to think about. Surely it's not just brown people, black people, Native people that are committing crimes. So why are we the ones that are the majority of the prison population? And why, these are all just questions that I'm throwing out there. Why is this thing with ICE scaring so many of us? So many of us. There's older people that I know, there's, aunts, cousins, ninos that are afraid of it. And I think that that is ridiculous. That is not what this country is about. And thank you so much for bringing that up, Tish, because I think it is something that, yes, it has to be talked about, and it is not comfortable to talk about it, but that's the only way that we can get progress, in my opinion.
Yes, that is true. And it is uncomfortable to talk about it, especially when I'm ignorant to it and watching or gaining maybe my knowledge from TikTok. But at the same time, knowing that I had two young Hispanic girls working with me at where I work, and they were even saying those same words. We're afraid. We're afraid. Should we lock the doors? And like I said, I'm not comparing myself to any other race. But then it made me super sad, because then I thought, I'm sure that this is the daily for African American people who might be afraid to be, Black every day. And it really, really made me stop to think about that, thinking that, I'm afraid now because I've got two girls that are like, what if they come get us, and I was trying to say, no, they're not, and trying to be the mom. But inside I was like, wow, I pray that they don't. And, them saying, should we lock the doors to the place of business that I work at? And I said, no, we'll be fine. But then as I was driving home, I started thinking, I bet a lot of African American people feel like this on the daily. And yes, racial profiling and being pulled over. And there was someone that just made a comment that says a lot of false imprisonment. And like you said, Allegra, I think it even goes deeper, that when we think about why are so many minorities imprisoned? Is it because of their race and our lack of opportunity? Is it because we are judged and not given an opportunity because of skin color? Is it because, I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a whole lot of things. Like, I think that, so in my case, where I grew up, in the state that I live, it's an impoverished state, right? So because there's poverty, impoverished areas usually lack resources, they lack education, they lack the ability to defend themselves, they lack the ability to know the laws. I always tell this story. When I was in elementary school, my bathroom didn't have toilet paper. So that's how some of us grew up. My mom had to send me toilet paper to school. So when you grow up in those conditions, I feel like it just sort of becomes, first of all, it's kind of what you're used to. You get used to crumbs, so you don't want any more. And as far as like, why do I feel that the majority of the people in prison, I think that that's part of it, is the fact that they are in impoverished areas and they have a lack of education, they have a lack of guidance, they have a lack of mentors, and so they fall into the system and they continue. But I also believe that there are many stereotypes that also go along with that, and that has been proven time and time again. Not to get into details, but there's certain people that have felons that if they're not of a color, if they're not colored, they're doing things right now. And it's like, how does that even happen? How does skin color determine the level of crime or violence that you are? How is it that the majority of those people are locked up? And for me, I feel that it's a lack of resources. They don't have the money to defend themselves. They don't have the knowledge to know how to defend themselves, and they just become victims of the system, is what I think.
I love that. I agree. How about you, Elena?
Well, it brings me to think of, and I know I brought this up just not that long ago, but there's a sentence in a movie that hit home for me, gosh, when I was younger, and it's, just because I speak with an accent doesn't mean I think with an accent. And so I think a lot of times, again, just being Hispanic, that's my perspective. That's where I'm coming from. And so just knowing that there are people that have an accent and they're judged, they're treated differently. They are thought that they're stupid, not as intelligent. When I think of my grandmother spoke only Spanish, and yet she learned how to understand English, and she learned how to write, and she learned how to, count her money and do all of these things. But because she had an accent, I remember going to the grocery store with her when I was little. I would sit on the cart, on the bottom. That was one of the things that I looked forward to every Saturday at 10 a.m. That was when she went to the grocery store. But to see how she was treated, broke my heart. And I think I was around like 13 or 14 when I saw that movie, and that one line: just because I speak with an accent doesn't mean I think with an accent. And I think if we could all understand that somebody that is bilingual, they're smarter than those of us that only speak one language. And so how does that turn into a negative? Like, why would you think different of them just because they're having trouble speaking without an accent? And so for me, it's I haven't experienced it into the depth that I know some people have. But I am in an environment where I can tell you that if you have the funds to throw money at a problem, your color will go away. And I've witnessed that. I've witnessed coming from money and seeing Hispanics throw money at a problem, and it's like, hey, we're with cops, and we're best friends now. So I think it just depends on the character of the individual. Because it's almost like in a moment, then the prejudice goes away because now there's a new color involved, and it's called green, And so I've seen some pretty ugly things. But, I don't know. I just go back to ignorance. I just think it's people not taking the time to want to understand, not if they think it doesn't affect them, it's kind of like out of mind, out of sight, not my problem. But then yet when they're in that environment, it's almost like fear of the unknown. So let's treat it badly because I don't know anyone with a different skin color than mine. So it makes me afraid. And so just like any fear mechanism, you're going to fight against it. And I think it's just ignorance.
I agree. And I think it's ridiculous even that we have to talk about people not liking people or judging people or ridiculing or beating people because the color of their skin. It is the most ridiculous thing that I just can't even believe that we even have to talk about.
I remember being a sophomore in high school, and I was like on the pom-pom team and, dance, this and that, and student council. And, I was just very involved in high school, and I really liked this basketball player. He was a little bit older, and we went on a double date because I couldn't go on a date by myself. But a friend of mine went with his best friend, and we went on a double date, and we really had a great time. He was a little bit older, but on the basketball team, I was pom-poms. And the moment that his parents found out that it was me, and they were not going to have it. They were not going to have him dating a Mexican. They didn't want to hear anything about it. They didn't even want to meet me. And, I have to give him credit for being honest with me because there really was no other reason. We had a great time. We kind of liked each other, but I respect him still to this day for being honest with me about that. But that came from his parents. They didn't even want to get to know me. And, so those are my personal experiences, and I don't know how we change it in the big picture, but I think that it begins with each one of us, like each one of us individually taking the steps to reach out and figure out how can we have the conversations, how can we make this not okay. I don't know.
Exactly, and that's what I was going to wrap up in and thinking, what kind of hope, what hope do we have in terms of making this end? Will it ever end? Just educating people, and I hate to say trying to or tell people that they need to have tough skin, but for me, I'm the type of person that I can pretty much let anything roll off my back and whatever, if that's what you think of me, I don't care. I'm serving the Lord and the purpose that he has for me. I don't need your approval. I'm not serving you. I would love to get to know you as a human being and celebrate you as a human being, regardless of what color your skin is. Let me ask you guys this before we go. And actually, there's a couple of people that have some really good comments here. Let me just read really fast and then I'm going to ask you guys. So, one guest says there are good and bad people of all colors. That is true. So true, Christy. There are just as many white people committing crimes as well. Melinda Dobson says, hey, I have a Texan accent and speak slow and deliberate. Some people say Texans are slow and stupid. Starts at home, that and teaching the children that we are all different, but we are all equal. And that is true. And I do believe that it starts at home. I think it also has a lot to do with, are you a strong individual, or are you going to go with the crowd? Are you going to form your own opinion, or are you going to follow the opinions of others? And again, it all boils down to ignorance. So what do you guys think? What gives you hope that things could change? What gives you hope that things could change?
Allegra?
For me, what gives me hope is God, because God is love. And I believe that love is always stronger than hate. I feel that the more that people start to get to know themselves and their identity and be strong in who they are and love themselves, then they can start to love people around them. Because usually when we don't like somebody because of something as simple as skin color, it's because we do not love ourselves first. Because if we did, we wouldn't have an issue with anyone else, because we would know that they're our brother or our sister through God. And along with that loving of self comes loving God, getting a relationship with God, because when you know God, you know that God is love and that God does not separate based on something like race or skin color. So because I know God, I have hope that things become better.
I love that. And that is so true. Thank you for sharing that. Elena, what gives you hope?
For that, I have to just pretty much piggyback off of what Allegra says, because to me, ultimately, he sees the big picture. He sees what's going on. And I just feel like we have to give it to him. That is, and when I say him, that's my God, my God. I feel like this is such a massive issue. It's massive. And if we looked at it as a whole, we would think, what can I do? How can I change this? Like I'm just this little tiny peon over here in this like vast space that's kind of ugly, And so I think the thing that does give me hope is the prayer that I have every day, that God's Spirit, enter the hearts of those that need it most. And come to find him, and I know our God is not a rude God, so he's not going to just come in and barge his way in. He has to be invited, but I actually pray that those hearts that are closed off to him, that he find that little crack and just give them a glimpse, just give them something that lets them know that is God, and that they will open their heart and they will come to know him. And that's the only hope that I carry. But that's not only over this topic that we're speaking of. It's just the state that our world is in, period. Like allow him to show himself and let people recognize that that's him and invite him in. And that's the hope that I carry every day for all of it.
Absolutely, because his love is transformative. There's no one on this earth that can change you. Like you said, a little crack, let him in. And boy, you're going to see yourself change. Like Allegra said, come to love yourself and then love others. Boy, that's the world changing. I mean, if it can change to bad, why can't we make it change for the better? And I think that if we continue to discuss things like this my hope is that someone who has experienced racism will listen to it, and someone who hasn't experienced racism will listen to it, and maybe just
Exactly.
gain a little bit of knowledge, or maybe it will transform or help them rethink, reshape their way of thinking about others. It's skin
Yes.
color.
And I do want to share, when I think of hope, and this is something that maybe everyone else will put in their back pocket. But for me, hope means HOPE, and that is help one person every day. And that's just the little bit of hope that I can pour out there, is if I am helping one person every day, then maybe, just maybe, that's the ripple that will make the difference. And that's the hope that I live with every day.
Amen. It is a ripple. It's a ripple effect. So we'll keep on talking about it. We'll keep on standing our ground. We'll keep on defending ourselves and others, and be the voice for the voiceless. And that's the whole reason why I wanted to bring this podcast to light, the subject to light, because of the way that a young lady was feeling, and the time where she should be her happiest. Now she's worried that her son, who is going to be biracial, now she's trying to figure out how I prepare him for this cruel world. And it's a cruel world, everyone. It doesn't, none of us are immune, but I just felt I need to do something about this, because someone is in the best time of her life is feeling great worry. So yes, thank you both for coming on. You guys are amazing. You have some comments here. It says, what lovely ladies these guests are. I agree. Everyone says, yes, this hope allows us to make choices that is above skin color. And we do have a special prayer request here from Melinda Dobson. She says, please pray for me and my family. My mama's funeral is tomorrow. Most definitely, Melinda, I am so sorry for your loss. So we'll be praying for sure. Thank you both for coming on. I appreciate you guys sharing your opinions, your experiences, and we look forward to having even better, bigger, deeper conversations such as this. And I thank both of you for being a part of this. Until next time, everyone, you guys have a good night. We'll see you again. Bye.
This is your Prospera era, where dreams align with grace, abundance flows like rivers. You've stepped into your place. Rise, reign, and remember, you were born to shine. Welcome to your moment, Prospera, it's time.
We hope you enjoyed today's show on Prospera TV Network. Make it a point to visit us on YouTube and catch all your favorite shows anytime you want. Interested in hosting a show of your own? Or advertising your business on our network? Contact Elena Rodriguez,